Look, I get a lot of game ideas and like game pitches from you guys, our audience, and unfortunately, whilst there are some really good ones, there's a lot of bad game ideas that you guys come up with as well. And why do I call them bad game ideas? Because it's very easy. I'm not just shitting on your dream. I actually just think that there are some very big flaws with them. So in this video, I want to talk about 5 of the like most common issues I guess I see when people come to me with their game idea. And the good thing is it doesn't usually mean that you have to scrap your entire game idea. You just need to make like a few small changes and you can keep working on it. But a game idea is such a vital and important thing because it's literally the core of your game that if you start with a bad game idea, you're building your game on like a sand foundation basically. And it doesn't matter how much time and love and effort you put into it, if the core game idea is bad, it's not going to sell, people aren't going to want to play this, which generally isn't great because you're not only making games for yourself, no matter how much cope you have and you say that that's the only thing you care about. So I want to talk about those 5 things and tell you what exactly to do with that. Also stick around till the end of the video because I have something pretty cool for you if you do like game ideas. Now, the first problem that I see with game developers is that, okay, they have a game idea, but it's just too big. They come to me with these giant open world MMO style ideas and then they're like, yeah, I'm a solo developer. I just got like another kid. I already have 3 kids or whatever. I have like 5 hours a week. What do you think about my game idea? And it's like, it's maybe cool, but there is no way in hell you're ever going to be making it. Because yeah, sure, maybe you are comfortable with taking 7 years of your life working on one single game. But even then, are you really though? We preach a lot of small games on this channel, and small games I'm talking about development cycles of 4 to 8 months, and that generally already inflates to like over a year plus at a certain point. There's only so much time and discipline that you're going to have to work on a game at the end of the day. And there are a few people like your Eric Barons and whatever who do manage to work for 7 years on that one single game before releasing it, but you need to be kind of built different for that, I think, where an idea can sound really good on paper and you can be like very, very hype right now, and like 2 months from now, you're maybe even still going to be very hype, but you're going to run into like issues that just make it too slow. And at a certain point, your game is not going to be made if the scope is too big, if the game idea is too big, because you're not going to be able to actually implement all of it and make all of this. Because there are some other problems as well, not just, oh, you can't make this. Also, generally, these giant scoped games, they take a very long time until you can get feedback. That's the benefit of small scoped games. You can spend like 2 weeks or whatever and get like that shitty first gameplay loop out already. So you can share it on Reddit or share it with your friends or share it in our Discord server. Just to be like, hey, this is my vision for the game. What do you guys think of it? Whereas if you are making those giant, super complex and in-depth games, for example, we're suddenly going from like 2 weeks to that first little core of the game to 2 years sometimes, which makes it extremely hard to get feedback on your game as well, to show it to the rest of the world and see, is what I'm doing actually something that should be done basically. And that extends as well into marketing. Once again, there's like a difference still between getting that first like very, very shitty version out that you can share to people, and then, you know, getting that Steam page up as well. There was a game I recently looked at on like, oh, can you review my Steam page? And it looked like a city builder, kinda, because it was just like some aerial shots of a really pretty landscape, and that's it. And then I asked them like, hey, what is this game actually? And they're like, yeah, this isn't actually going to be an RPG. And I'm like, but there's no gameplay yet, there's no characters yet, there's no nothing yet. Why are you marketing this already? It's impossible to do early marketing for a game that is so big that like 90% of the game isn't really implemented yet. So because of that, I always suggest you to tone down your ideas, to make something that you can realistically make in like a few years tops. But ideally, if you plan for like half a year to a year, that's going to balloon to 2x that time probably. And still it's going to be a long time period. I think that's also something, just to keep hammering on it. If these are the first games you make and it's like your dream game, yeah, but you've never made a game before. How do you know that you can do 7 years of this? Like, what have you done in your life for 7 years non-stop that you weren't forced to by society, like going to school or going to work? Chances are not that much. Do you really believe you have the discipline to work on games for that long? Or are you going to start like, you know, going to watch guitar learning next month and then completely forget about games and switch to the next hobby? Who knows? And then this next problem is one that you definitely see with the more artsy kinds of games, where it's just too vague. It's like, whenever someone comes up to me and they're like, I have this game idea, it's kind of like Return to the Obra Dinn, but with more meaningful choices or whatever. You're immediately like taking a relatively obscure, not like obscure, but hard to explain game, and then you're going to make more stuff based upon that. And the problem here is, okay, it's a very vague idea. What does this actually mean? Because I think this is something that a lot of developers, even though it's something very easy to do, forget. Is like, okay, describe me, what is the perspective? What's the viewpoint going to be? What's going to be the main actions the character is going to be doing? What is the final end goal and all of that? Because if you just tell me, oh, it's a game about making meaningful choices, what game is it? That's the big problem here. And the reason that this is a problem is, once again, marketing. If you can't explain to me what the game is going to be about, then forget about putting your Steam short description or whatever that explains what the game is about. But also, do you even know the game that you're making? Because you can always have this problem where, you know, your game ends up in this limbo of every 3 months, if you don't have a clear enough vision of what is the game you want to make, you basically start making a new game, but you just stay in that same big Unity project or whatever, and you just like decide to pivot. So you have a bunch of like unfinished mechanics from a previous like game idea, and then you're like, no, I'm gonna switch, I'm gonna iterate upon this, but half of them are unfinished, and you're going to end up with this Lovecraftian mess of a game that honestly is so unclear about its reason of being and its purpose, that you don't even know what you originally set out for and what you want to go for in the end. And this is where things like game design documents can come in, but I think the easiest way, and I'll probably mention this multiple times throughout the video, my number one piece of advice always, if you want to validate if your game idea is kind of clear and interesting, is to write a short Steam page description for that game, even if it's just day one of getting that game idea. So on Steam, you have like the Steam capsule, and then underneath it, you have like the short description. Can you, in 300 characters, write a succinct explanation of what your game is about? If you can do that, you're probably on the right track. But I noticed that a lot of game developers already struggle with this. When I ask them, what's your game about? They start going on this long-ranted, like almost brain dump of, it's kind of like this, but then mostly like this, and then I don't know exactly, like you do this and this, and it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. You should be able to tell me this in 300 characters or less as your kind of elevator pitch to a certain degree. So this is something that you can do always, you should do with all of these steps. What would you explain to your game in 300 characters or less, which is like 2 sentences or whatever. Have a lot of verbs in there of what are the actions the player will be doing, what's the main goal, what's the environment, what's the genre, what's this perspective, and all of that. Cram it into there, and I think if you can do that, you have a pretty good idea about the game you're going to be making. Then we get one that honestly, I don't really mind that much. It's just you need a little bit of guidance for, I would say. And it is when you're making games that are basically too derivative, which means, oh, I'm going to be making Among Us, but everyone's a pirate, or everyone's on a spaceship, or whatever. Like Among Us is already on a spaceship, whatever. Where you're not really adding anything new except reskinning the game. And the problem here is that clones, like true clones, very rarely stand out. There's a difference between being cloned and being inspired by, definitely. But I think that is something that you need to keep in mind. Are you going to be making another Overcooked? Okay, that's a good idea, maybe. But what are you going to be doing to actually make it better, to improve upon the thing that already exists? And I think that is a harder one, where it's very easy to copy a game that already has success, or a game that's already been made, basically. But simply doing a copy is not going to make it interesting to other people. Because why would they want to go and like eat like expired, like, you know, cake from the grocery store, so to say, when they already have like an infinite supply of like this S-tier cake that they can eat whenever they want, which is, for example, something that we ran into as well when we made our own automation game, where our main inspirations were Factorio and Timberborn. It's like, but why would anyone want to play our scrappy little game compared to those games? And those are hard questions you have to ask yourself. The benefit is this is a relatively easy one to fix, where if you do notice that, okay, my games is way too derivative, way too similar, how do I solve this? You need to add something, you need to change something. Because another problem is just standing out, and I saw this especially with content creator outreach. So recently, this is something near and dear to my heart. I feel like there has been an uptick in unicycle pizza time likes, as in games, streamer-based rage games centered around a unicycle mechanic. There's not like a giant explosion, but it's still something that I did notice. And I think to a certain degree, if you send an email to a content creator who covered Unicycle Pizza Time before, which is a pretty decent amount of people who did that, and you're now, hey, we have another Unicycle like 1 to 4 player co-op where you have to like not fall over, it's going to always be harder for that content creator to be interested in it, basically, because the novelty has fallen off already. That exact same pitch has been sent to them before, and they potentially have covered, like, created content about it before, which now also has set a precedent. If those videos performed meh or like not super amazingly, well, why would they cover it again? Because the incentive for them in terms of just raw view numbers often isn't there at all, because someone has already made that thing before. So you need to figure out what is going to make this more interesting, more unique in all of that, compared to just reskinning it. You can't just be like, hey, I'm going to make another game and it's kind of like Vampire Survivors but in hell, when other games like Heretics Fork and whatever already exist as well, for example. It gets a lot harder then to stand out with your game idea. And whilst technically, you know, this could be a game that you can make, it's not going to be a game that probably people are going to be interested in. And speaking of games that people probably aren't going to be interested in, I think that's kind of another, not like trap, but it's a problem where you aren't being honest with yourself, I feel, where people come to me and it's like, how do I market my game? But they're making a game that's way too personal to them. Like, the game idea has like a subset of 4 people who are interested in it, and like one of them is going to be you, and then another one is going to be your friend because you grew up in like the same medium or whatever. Where it always sucks, because these people, you cannot have a discussion with them, because they will instantly deflect every piece of like asking questions about their game of like, yeah, I'm making this game for me. It's like, okay, cool, brother, but why do you put it on Steam then? Why do you want to go through the motions of marketing, or are you just going to add to the slop? I think some examples of this, like old school games, where someone's like, yeah, I grew up in the 80s or whatever, playing on like arcade games or whatever, and I want to make a bullet hell style like shooter game, genre that's not really popular anymore. And I'm not really going to do anything except go and bring back my love for this game. Or like Toho games, kind of. I know Toho has like a fan base, but you get what I mean. You're making games that have this very weird subset of also like setting and genre and all of that, that makes it so that honestly nobody almost is interested in these games. Like, you're not really talking to anyone else except you. And the problem then, or like, it's not really a problem, I'm not gonna say don't make those games, but I am gonna say don't flood Steam with those games, because there's no point in it. You're going to hate your life as well with marketing or whatever. You're not going to learn from that, because once again, you're making a game that only 4 people are interested in, so content creators probably don't want to play this game. I think something else you see is like those, you know, classic RPGs like text-based, where it's just pure text, and it's like, okay, this is a game that you probably like, and maybe it's inspired by like your D&D campaign or whatever, which is what I've heard as well of like, I'm gonna make a game based on my Dungeons and Dragons campaign and what we did, and it's like, okay, that's maybe cool, but it's what you experienced. You have a bias for liking this game that can kind of give you some blind spots in taking things a bit more serious. At the end of the day, you're watching Bite Me Games. We are not here only about the artistic side. We do talk about financials, we do talk about marketing and all of that. And if you then come to me and ask me, what should I do about your game, and you get this hyper personal thing, then don't get like super defensive and like, oh, I'm just making a game for myself, bro. It's not that serious. Because it's like, what are you doing here? There are other channels if you want to focus on that. I think if you watch this, I generally do hope that you want to take some moderately decent effort of marketing your game, of making a game that appeases the Steam algorithm for as much as you want to say it, whilst you can still make a game that you enjoy. So I think that is just the thing where you need to ask yourself these questions of, does this game belong on Steam, or do I just want to do this to learn Godot at the end of the day without that real goal of finances and whatever? Because it's not worth spinning up a company, paying the $100 to Steam, maybe paying more money on capsule art and whatever, for a game that is just for myself. I think that's my rant is over now. And then the final thing is like, you know, genres that are too late, or like game ideas that are too late. I guess this is kind of similar to the too derivative, but now we're looking a bit bigger at the overall gaming market in general. I think the most common or obvious example of this is when people come and pitch me their 2D platform or Metroidvania, talking about emotions and like dealing with grief. And it's like, okay, honestly, like, you know, if we looked at this on a vacuum, you probably have an interesting story to tell. But Steam isn't a vacuum. We need to look at everything else that's there. That's the big thing as well. Game ideas, the There's like the 3 circles of the Venn diagram, the game you want to make, the game you can make, and then the game that like people want to play. And you need to find that slice in the middle. And in this case, maybe you want to make the game and maybe you can make the game, but maybe, you know, there is nobody anymore left who wants to play this style of game. Who wants to play, like, honestly, a pretty mid, like, Godot basic beginner project pixel art platformer when Silksong exists, when Hollow Knight exists, when all of these games exist, and you're going to try to compete with all of those without really adding much new. That's what I mean with, it's kind of similar to the 2 derivative, where you do need to be realistic about what makes this game idea special and not just another generic 2D platformer. Or there's other genres as well, like, you know, there's so many. We had this problem recently where one of our team members was like, they came to us with a pitch of like, hey, I want to make a Viking city builder. And it's like, cool, but what are we doing different? What are we, you know, Viking city builders have been existing for so long already, or like RTS games, which either we have to very drastically innovate and like start new mechanics or whatever, but you know, Viking combat and ship combat is not something new and innovative, or we have to be better in like quality and polish level than other games that are already out, which is also not possible really. So I think that is a thing, realizing when is it too late. I think one other like genre example for this is the desktop idlers, where they've been blowing up for basically the past year, I would say. But I think that if you go into making a desktop idler now, you missed the boat, buddy. And it's going to be way harder because there's already so many desktop idlers. And I think especially with desktop idlers, you can only run one at the same time, basically. You can't have 7 desktop idlers on at the same time because they kind of all compete with the same screen space. And I think this is an example very much of it's going to be kind of too late. And that is that realism. And also going back to that first mistake, if you are working on that 7-year-long scoped game, you may miss an entire wave of like people being interested in this game. Maybe you'll get lucky, but there's also a big chance that you were working on a Vampire Survivors, like for example, 3 years before Vampire Survivors came out, and you're still working on it to this day. Well, that entire wave has come and gone at this point, and you're still very far from release. So those are some of the big problems that I see with game ideas. And I wonder, do you see any of those in like your own game idea? Can you give a correct, interesting Steam short page description, for example? It's something that a lot of people can't do. Now, I told you there is something that if you were interested in game ideas that I wanted to give to you, and that is an extra bonus video that's like 1 hour and 10 minutes long. That's basically a free course that I made because I saw another game dev YouTuber make a course on game ideas that was paid, and I'm like, I can do better than this. I'm gonna make it better and free. So if you want to dive in deeper into game ideas and all the different thoughts and like how to design based around emotions and all of that, there's a link down below to a free Patreon video. You don't need to pay, you don't need to sign up or anything. Just go and watch that. It's a really good video, probably one of the best ones I've made in a long time. And it dives in way deeper into game ideas if that's something that you're interested in. Apart from that, thank you very much for watching. If you're new here, we make videos about game development and things that we learn along the way, uploading video every week. So if that's something that's interesting to you, then be sure to head down below and subscribe. Apart from that, that's all I really have to say. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!